Welcome to The Secret Diary of a Producer, the podcast where we talk to the people behind some of the biggest television and film productions ever made. Recently, the government announced plans to almost entirely eradicate junk food from school lunch menus. It's a decision that owes itself to one very memorable television series that was broadcast 21 years ago now. It makes me so old just saying that. Jamie's School Dinners. In 2005, this landmark documentary series exposed the poor state of school food in the UK and triggered a national conversation about child nutrition and the role of food education in schools. It went on to generate an actual change in government policy to the tune of £280 million and the infamous banning of the evil turkey Twizzler. Zoe Collins was Jamie's employee number one at his production company Fresh One back in the day and was one of the producers of the series before going on to become the MD of the Jamie Oliver Group Media. Welcome, Zoe, to The Secret Diary of a Producer.
Thank you very much.
Nice to see you.
Great to be here.
Let's just start at the beginning to how it all came about and how Jamie's School Dinners came into life. So you were the first employee of Fresh One with Jamie Oliver back at the early part of this century. Tell me, how did that happen?
So Jamie and I met actually when I was working on the Radio 1 breakfast show with Zoe Ball. And one of my jobs was to book the celebrities, book the guests. And I'd been approached by Jamie's agent, actually, and I didn't really think that a chef was right for the Zoe Ball breakfast show. And I was like, oh, no, we're Ibiza. Do you know what I mean? I'm not sure.
Jamie who?
I'm not sure that food is high on our list of priorities. But it was Zoe who watched the Naked Chef and said, actually, this guy's really got something. He's really interesting. He's doing something a bit different. We should totally get him in. So we booked him. And I very much remember first clapping eyes on him. He turned up at Yalding House, which is now a caravan restaurant, as it happens, right, on Great Portland Street.
Oh, yes.
But at the time, it was like this seat of youth culture. And so he turned up at the offices there on his scooter because he's nothing if not on brand at all times. And he was still working at the River Cafe at the time because he didn't know that this whole media thing was going to take off. So he had worked the night before and he was exhausted. And he came in and we had this silly feature where we had cooked him food from his book. Mm-hmm. And then we blindfolded him and made him eat them live on air. I know it was such a bad format for radio. Anyway, the first food we fed him was kedgeree that I had made, but I had made it the day before and it's been sitting in the fridge overnight. So this poor young boy who remember going on Radio 1 on the breakfast show back then would like make or break you. It was huge. We were talking 12 to 15 million listeners and he was really nervous and he was really tired. And anyway, he didn't appreciate my kedgeree very much. But what it meant is that we had like this bonding moment. Do you know what I mean? I actually had to get him a waste paper basket to rid himself.
What had you done to this kedgeree?
I know. It was just, it's not, it's curry and fish and rice at
early in the morning.
At 7 o'clock in the morning. So, it wasn't brilliant. Anyway, but he and I bonded over that moment and we became firm friends. And we talked a lot. We're both in our 20s. We both felt this sort of sense of responsibility that we had this incredible platform. We felt really lucky. We wanted to do great things with it. I actually grew up on a small holding. So I had sort of interest in food and food production. And we both sort of wanted to make the world a better place. And we talked a lot about TV shows. And eventually he said to me, look, why don't you leave radio, go and get TV wings, if you like. I'm going to set up my production company and come and work for me. And I didn't really believe that would happen. I was like, yeah, sure. Sounds really nice. And he did. He called me about 18 months later and said, okay, I'm ready to go. So I went to work for him we had literally a cupboard in Stephen Street. And that's where we developed our first show ideas, which was Jamie's Kitchen, actually, was the first thing we created, which was people would know it better as 15. Yep. We took in all the young people and helped train them in working in restaurants.
So essentially, The Naked Chef comes out and he's obviously this brilliant piece of undiscovered talent that Pat Llewellyn has discovered. And it's an amazing series that changes the face of food on television. But what I've always thought is very interesting about what he then did next was he didn't just go and do another cooking show, another cooking show, another. He did do those, but at the same point in time, he created, as you said, he created a production company, which back then for a piece of talent to do is incredibly forward thinking, particularly a guy who's in his 20s and is, you know, as you say, when you first met him, he was still working in the River Cafe. What do you think? Do you think he had an idea of where this was all going? Did he have sort of like a vision of what he wanted it to be, or how was he so far ahead of his time at that point, do you think?
You know, Jamie's a really interesting and incredible person to be around, in as much as he approaches things in a really fearless way. I think it's on the record that he wasn't comfortable with the terms of the relationship between himself and on Optimum. And so he felt that he would be better off and better able to express himself creatively if he was in control of his own destiny. And I think that's as far as he thought, really. I mean, I don't think he thought, oh, I have this vision. And at the end, you know, and I have this really clear sort of laid out strategic plan. I know he wouldn't think like that because it's just not how he thinks. He thinks about, his approach is, why can't I do this? Why wouldn't I do this? And so I think for him, it just felt like the obvious next step. The other thing I would say about Jamie is he thinks like the head of a family all the time. He is the head of a family, an actual family, but he's very much about gathering around himself the people who he cares about and trusts the most. And I was really lucky enough to be one of those. And so he wants to surround himself by great creatives, people he trusts, people he likes, people he can be the most authentic version of himself with. And I think that's probably more of a motivating factor than some sort of, you know, strategic business plan that he was playing out.
Yeah, tell me about School Dinners. How was that? How did that come about? He obviously felt like he wanted to put himself out there in that kind of a way, in quite a big way.
Yeah. So there's so many sort of legends about how this came about. There's the one that I've got the most used to said. I can no longer remember exactly what is fact or what is fiction around this. I can tell you how I experienced it, because for me, I was actually on maternity leave. So towards the end of Jamie's Kitchen, I had gone off to have my eldest son, and I came in for what we now call a kit day. But we didn't call it then. It was just a meeting. In fact, my husband dropped me off. I breastfed. I'm sure my son won't appreciate me saying this, but I fed my son outside in the car.
Wow.
And my husband waited for me whilst I went in to have my meeting. And in that meeting, Jamie said, I have this plan. I have this idea. I think we should do something about school dinners. The legend is that this was quite inspired by conversations with his father. I think he had made a couple of slightly derogatory comments around young people and the food they eat, and his father had said, you know, look, why are you just going to the press talking about that? These people work really hard, you know, in schools, and parents, they work really hard to look after their children. Like, get amongst it, do something about it, rather than just, you know, giving people a hard time. And so he came from that, inspired to do something about food in schools. But yeah, my experience was, I want to do something about food in schools. I don't know what that is. I don't know how to do it. I can't get into the system. No one's going to take me seriously. Let's make a TV show about it. And of course, in retrospect, that's genius, because TV producers are great at making things happen. We you know, to create from nothing a something that didn't exist before. And then, of course, the show would change the conversation, would put pressure on organizations, pressure on the politicians. But I'm not even sure that we were like thinking that far ahead, or certainly not as a TV producer, I wasn't. What I was thinking was, oh, this sounds great. this sounds like this has got Jeopardy written all over it. Or, how are we going to cast this? How are we going to tell this story? Can Jamie do this again? Can he pull something out the bag? We were fresh from the success of Jamie's Kitchen, which had gone down really well and had been really well received and had huge sort of critical success, as well as was having this real impact on young people's lives. So I remember feeling excited at the size of the challenge from a storytelling perspective. I never felt it was my job, and I do say this to TV producers who have worked with me since then. I never felt it was my job to change the system. I always thought it was my job to tell the very best version of the story that we possibly could. And that's what I was leaning into. So it felt this sort of audaciousness of the challenge was what I felt most excited about.
Yeah, I get that. And presumably having somebody who was willing to be seen to sort of fail and to struggle and then eventually triumph, which is not, there's actually not that many people who are willing to do that in the public eye, particularly back then where everything was much more sort of polished and so forth. People would do it a bit more now. That enabled you to create, as you say, it is something real and genuine, and something that's actually happening. It wasn't a TV construct, was it? In the way that we'd be familiar with.
It's really unusual, I think, and I don't think Jamie enjoyed a lot of that. I think he'll often talk about how hard he found that, how lonely he felt sometimes, where he wasn't in control of what was happening around him, and that he knew that he might not do this, he might fail, and he found that really, really difficult. There's no doubt. I think that's really unusual. And I think it comes back to the earlier point about surrounding himself with people he could trust, and that understanding that there had to be a possibility that he could fail. Otherwise, there was no real story to tell. We always believed that at some point there would be a goal achieved, and one of the sort of early, in storytelling terms, it seems so obvious that we would tell the school dinners story through the lens of one school. But that wasn't obvious at the beginning. And so we sort of thought, well, he can win, he can change one school, right? He can we'll reduce it down so that we can have these kind of narrative beats where we have change achieved, goal achieved, but okay, we need to scale it up now. We need to make it bigger. So that way we could always deliver that sort of, that ending that you wanted, but we never knew where this was going to go ultimately. That's actually really hard. It's really hard. I mean, I talk to commissioners a lot about this. Maybe some of them will be listening and they'll recognize this conversation we have had, where I've said, I can't guarantee where this is going to. I know you want to know that we're going to deliver the outcome of this campaign that you're talking about, because you want to have a sense of what you've achieved at the end of it. But for this to be a real story and to have real impact, we can't actually control that ending. We have to do everything in our power to make it so, but it's going to have to be a real live story.
Yeah, that is a very familiar conversation for me with commissioners as well, but probably even more so now with brands, without going down that road. But they really want to know what's going to happen, and you have to say, well, if you want the best content, then you're going to have to sort of live with that unknowing, because otherwise it will just be predictable and bland. So to go back to the moment. So you got in for the meeting. Your husband's waiting outside, and she's going to do this show. It's going to be him. I always get this idea in my head, which I'm sure is wrong, and you'll put me right, that when Jamie Oliver goes and pitches something, they say, yes, it's a commission. Right. There's no, because it's Jamie and they know he's going to bring a certain audience. How much kind of interrogation is there of the idea? Will they say no to him, or will they, how is that?
First of all, that's definitely not the case.
Yeah.
Even now, that's not the case. We have to work really hard with the commissioners in order, it's got to work for everybody. But back then, especially, it really wasn't the case. I mean, if you remember, Naked Chef was on the BBC. We moved across to Channel 4. Ben Froe was the commissioner of Jamie's Kitchen. You know, he wants to know, well, are we going to get a different Jamie? I don't really want this kind of polished, managed, naked chef. I want the real story. I want the warts and all. I want to see who this person is. So there were enormous debates around that at the time. It was really hard to get Jamie's Kitchen commissioned. School Dinners was a little different because we'd come off the success of Jamie's Kitchen. And also as a production company, we were a little more formed. I mean, at the time we were pitching Jamie's Kitchen, we were working in co-production with Talkback because we were just me. By the time we came around to School Dinners, you know, we had structure, we had form, we had previous form to look at. So it was a different level of conversation. Peter Dell was the commissioner of School Dinners. I don't know if you've ever sat in a room with Peter Dell.
I haven't actually.
One of the calmest. I mean, first of all, he's very tall. So there's a commanding sort of air around him. He's a quiet man who's very efficient with his words. A brilliant man to sit in the edit with. You remember when commissioners would come into the edit and you'd sit in the edit and you'd all do your notes and you'd all read out your notes, and then does the commissioner agree with your notes or not? And Peter would let all of this sort of nonsense like carry on, and then he would say like 2 or 3 words that everything would fall apart around your ears, and then he'd like walk out the room and you'd be like, oh my God, we'll put everything together. Well,
like Gandalf or something.
Yeah. He is a brilliant man. And so I wasn't in the room when he commissioned, but I should imagine it was the same. So, you know, he would, I suspect, have looked at the elements of this. Jamie Oliver, an impossible task, a brilliant team, because we were working with Robert Thurkel, Dominique Walker, you know, a really great team. And I would have thought he would have thought, well, the bones of this have got great storytelling potential, and would have offered slightly less, I would have thought, in terms of, you know, multiple versions of decks, etc., that we tend to do now.
So you got the commission from Channel 4 and you're going into production. It's in 2004.
Right.
What do you remember about the beginning? What do you remember about the start of it?
Yeah. It was really protracted. So I came back to work, and my mission was to become the UK's leading expert on school dinners. That was the task Robert Thurkel set me. And that's what I did. I absolutely immersed myself. I went to every meeting. I read every document. I created this enormous dossier, actual like paper dossier folder of everything I could find around school dinners. I went to multiple schools. And met the civil servant in charge. I'm pretty sure by that time I had more information than they did. And we, at the same time, we were sort of really struggling with what the format should be. You know, how was Jamie going to mount this impossible task? It just felt so unwieldy. Do you know what I mean? So enormous a job. And really it was Dominique Walker who came in. She was the series director. And in her interview, she said, well, it's obvious, isn't it? You just got to do this through the lens of one school. And I remember I thought, oh yes, that is, in retrospect, that is obvious, but it hadn't been at that time. And so what she did is she really helped us sort of narrow it down through what's the single route? Who are the individuals through whom we're gonna tell this story? And that which was brilliant. But then the challenge became, well, the casting of that school now is everything, because we've absolutely limited this down to a story about Jamie and either a head teacher or a school dinner lady. That now is that. So and Jamie's this, you know, great character. He's charismatic. He's, you know, finds incredible words and ways to articulate things. He's got all this energy. Who is going to be the foil? Not that we want to see conflict necessarily, but we have to have a strong enough character who is going to help us understand the size of the challenge. You know, we've got to somebody who's going to help us understand, well, what is it? What are these costs, and why is that so difficult? And how is the detail of providing a healthy school dinner? Because it seems so obvious. do you want to provide young people healthy food at school? I mean, it's just such an obvious
Yeah.
answer to that question. So why isn't that happening? So we needed to find a really strong character who could help us bring that to life. And so from the moment we decided, oh, this is how we're going to tell this story, or tell the beginning of the story, then our focus became, goodness, we've got to cast this. We've got to find this brilliant school and these brilliant cast in order to do that. And so that became my next mission. And I mean, Lana and I were working on the casting. Again, all these people, brilliant producers. But what Lana is particularly brilliant at is she's great at casting. She's really good at gaining trust, at access. She's warm. You just trust her. You just want to go, "La." You want to you tell your life story to her. And so she and I then got out on the road, and we must have visited 30, 40, so many schools we visited before we found Trisha, the headmistress, and Nora, who of course became like the star of the show.
Yeah. Yeah, I think what I think what was so clear, and I think you really nailed it, is that question of, we all want children to eat well and have good school dinners. That's a no-brainer, right? And everyone goes, yeah, of course it's a no-brainer. Why are we not doing that? But then when you actually break that down into the practicalities of it, and as you were talking about, I was remembering the scenes where he's looking at the pence per pupil per lunch, and they stick with me, as being the kind of key moments. There's always the dream, and then there's always the reality. How do you turn the reality into the dream? And I think for me that was the sort of strongest narrative power. That was the narrative power of that series, was that it looked under the bonnet and then tried to deal with the actual nuts and bolts of it, rather than trying to just sort of gloss it or do it in a kind of idealistic way. So eventually you find the school and you find your characters.
I would love to tell you a story about the casting.
Yeah, please.
Just because it's just a great reminder to the power and the importance of that. So Lana and I have been out on the road. We've been to so many schools. We were getting close to filming, so we were beginning to move on. I mean, we were both going out. We were both seeing 2 schools a day, so we were getting through 4 schools a day, and we were coming back and looking at the footage we had shot, and but we had to move on to actually producing the first day's shoot. And so I was actually in the office on this day, and Lana said, "Oh, I've got 2 more schools. You know what? I've already booked these schools. I'm just gonna go and look at them, because we didn't think we had absolutely nailed it. I'm just gonna go and look at them anyway, because whatever. You don't want to let them down." And she came back and she said, "Look, I've met this woman, this school dinner lady, and she's something else. She's a really strong character. And casting her is either going to be the most genius thing we've ever done, or it's going to be almost impossible for us to make this show, because she doesn't think that this is doable. She doesn't believe that Jamie's mission is doable." Luckily, the headmistress, Trisha Jaff, who's a fabulous woman, wanted it to happen and was totally supportive and said, we should do this. It's really important. But yeah, Lana sat down, we really thought about it, really thought hard, about whether this was the right pairing or not. And again, it comes back to that sense of slight lack of control, but knowing that if he could work with Nora and turn that school kitchen around, then he would have proven something of real significance to other school kitchens. So we all, held hands and made the leap in the end. And the relationship between Jamie and Nora was so important, not just for the show, not just for storytelling, but for Jamie as well. Because in Nora, he had this sort of symbol, really, of all the challenges that he would face later on. And by really taking that seriously and really working with her, and by her really articulating to him exactly what these challenges were, as you say, in minutiae detail, it forced him to really engage with the issue. So it was. I would like to take some credit, but I have no credit for finding Nora. It was entirely Lana who just did that last day. It was the last school on the last day that we really nearly didn't do.
And that was where you found, I mean, it worked in the classic sort of protagonist-antagonist way, didn't
Correct,
you?
yeah.
And Nora was the great antagonist, and if you the sort of personification of the state, or or whatever, bureaucracy, whatever you ever want to call it. So he gets to work turning this really fantastic characters but very difficult scenario around, and you're filming it. And as you said before, it's a genuine, authentic journey. You don't really know what's going to happen. Do you remember what any of the kind of moments where you were just thinking, he's never going to be able to do this, or this is just never going to happen, we're not going to have an end to the show?
Yeah, loads of times. Loads of times. Like on a small basis. I mean, you referred to a scene, and which he filmed in our offices, where he's at a kitchen and he's got the money. He's trying to work out the money, and he's got the ingredients from the school kitchen in front of him. So it's not his usual sort of borough market sourced ingredients. Like, he's got the actual ingredients, and he's sitting there trying to work it out. And we're all the office space is alive. It's an actual office space at that time. And it was really uncomfortable because he was having a real dark night of the soul. He was thinking, I don't think I can do this. I don't think I can make the maths work with these products and these ingredients. And he really went through it. So at that point, there was a real sense of, oh gosh, has he bitten off more than he can chew, which was the actual marketing line, I think. And then where does this show go? And then there was also this other sense, which I alluded to earlier, which we had the first two. It was 4 episodes we were working on. We had the first 2 episodes kind of plotted out, more or less. We were going to turn around one comprehensive school in South London, and then we were going to go north, and we were going to look at primary schools in the north of England, because we wanted to reflect different ages, different parts of the UK. But beyond that, we didn't really know what would happen next. So we had a really, it was thrilling. I mean, maybe other people in the business, maybe other producers, maybe Robert Thurkel had a grand plan, but if he did, he wasn't sharing that with us. So we were at a ground level working with Jamie at the same time as he was trying to figure out this real world project. We were trying to figure out, well, how can we make this change happen, and how can we tell this story from a TV point of view? So it was wild. I never really doubted that it would be brilliant because the goal was brilliant. Because Jamie was brilliant, because the casting was brilliant, because we had all of these brilliant elements, but we didn't know 100% how we were going to get there.
Did you ever feel worried about him during that process, from a kind of I mean, as you say, has he bitten off more than he can chew? It's a brilliant line. But did you ever think that, because he's the public face of it, and you're so aware that he's got to carry this, whether it succeeds or it fails or whatever happens to it, he's got to carry it publicly? Were you ever concerned that maybe it was the end of Jamie Oliver, he couldn't pull this off? Or
no, I didn't. I not really. I mean, I always. TV people are wonderfully resourceful, aren't they? I mean, we're nothing if not able to create solutions in the face of adversity. I think that's we're really focused on that. And so it was stressful. It was really stressful. There was lots of anxiety, but I never doubted that we would find a way to A, deliver a brilliant show, and B, deliver some impact that Jamie could be proud of in some way or another. And I always thought that as long as the purpose, as long as what we were shooting for was good and true and righteous, which I did believe it was, then it would be fine.
It would all work out. So to go to the stress and anxiety of it, I think, I mean, there's a saying, isn't there? It's only television, and it's not brain surgery, it's only television, which is quite right. But in the moment, I think television can be peculiarly stressful, because you can actually feel like there's all this money riding on something. There's usually, there's often a transmission date or a deadline, or the money's, whatever it might be, and something catastrophic has happened or is about, or whatever, and you have to kind of work through. And as you say, TV people are incredibly resourceful, and they find solutions to these incredibly difficult, seemingly life-threatening problems, although they never are life-threatening. How do you handle that? How do you manage that stress and anxiety about what's going to happen, and is it going to be a disaster?
Yeah, I really wish, I knew you were going to ask me this question. I really wish I had a smart, brilliant answer. Okay, there's a few things that I maybe do. I always think about the heart of the project. Does it have real purpose to it? And I've been really lucky in everything that I've done. Everything that I have, that I'm known for, always has purpose. Sometimes that purpose is a small p, and sometimes it's a really big and obvious p. But at the heart of it, there's always a good and true reason for it to exist. And I find that really helpful. And I find that regardless of whether this is going to deliver the multi-million audience or less, if it has if that purpose is delivered through it, then I feel good about what I've done. I suppose, I mean, my husband's forever reminding me when I'm lurching from that anxiety moment that last week I was really happy and excited about something I was doing. So, I mean, it would be interesting having this conversation with him, actually, because he talks about, he's forever reminding me when I'm in that lowest point about last week when we won an award and I was really in that high point. And actually these, trying to find some of that middle ground where those emotions don't fly quite so high and quite so low. That's just never going to happen for me as an individual, because, do you know what I mean? I feel all of those depths and I feel all of those heights. And that's part of what makes working in TV kind of glorious and terrifying all at the same time. I think after a while, when you're lucky enough to be able to look back over a career of highs and lows, you can become increasingly comfortable and confident. You do need to remember that it's just not every show is going to be an enormous success. That's just not possible. It's just not statistically possible. I suppose things become on top when you've had maybe a string of less successful projects or projects that have lost their way. And then maybe you need to think a little bit more about the projects you're choosing, or are you asking the right questions at the beginning of them? Are you making sure that at the heart of this concept is something that is going to raise it, something that's going to either hold the format or some casting that's going to, really drive this forward. And so asking those questions of yourself and of the projects that you align with would become really important. But yeah, I wish I had a really sage. You should speak to Peter Dale. He's the guy who would have the sage comment about how to, keep yourself safe, I suppose, and keep yourself psychologically and emotionally safe through those highs and lows, because it is really tough. It is really tough.
I think I've come to the same conclusion as your husband, that whenever it's always temporary, whether you're very high, whether you're very low, it's always temporary. It's never going to last. So you can either look forward to getting better, or it's going to revert back to normal or something like that.
Yeah. The other thing I would say over the years is that I've taken great comfort from the teams that I work with.
Yeah.
So I mean, TV is also brilliant at that, isn't it? It's brilliant at like bringing a group of great creative individuals together for a period of time. And I have found real comfort and solace in those, even when those groups are at their lowest moments as well. One of my colleagues, Katie Millard, is very famous for really sort of building energy and humor and sort of bringing back into a production team that's sort of on its lowest ebb, a sense of a reminder of all that is great about what we do. So yeah, I do find that sort of particular working in teams, in production teams, really helpful in those moments.
I agree. Yeah, teams can make or break it, really, can't they?
Yeah.
And if you have the right people around you, it makes the world of difference. So to go back to school dinners, so you've got to the end of it now. Thank goodness for that. It's all filmed. Are you involved in the edit at all? Is that part and parcel of what you're doing?
So Robert Thurkell was our series editor. I don't know if you know Robert Thurkell. He's an extraordinarily talented series editor who's sort of hugely experienced, worked on loads of really high, well-known, hugely successful formats. And he would come into the edit and he would bring us into the edit, actually. There's nothing he likes more than taking I'm sure there's things he likes more, but one of the things he likes to do is to take a draft episode and to show it to different people who maybe are not so deeply involved in the edit process. And he's doing that because he wants to observe how your attention, where your focus, or where you lose attention, or what do you understand, or what you just kind of not really getting. And so I wasn't in the edit. I wasn't an edit producer, but we were certainly part of the edit process. And our job was really to just be quite frank about where bits we enjoyed and bits we didn't enjoy, bits we got and bits we didn't get, and yeah. It's so not the fine detail, but that sort of bigger storytelling elements.
And you were saying to me before that sometimes he would come in and say, "I've shown it to my dog walker.
Yeah.
You've got to change it all."
Yeah, so that's exactly right. So he would take a version of the show and he would show it to his dog walker or his cleaner. And his point, I think, was that as producers, we've invested so much in scenes or elements of the story. We think these moments are brilliant because we've nurtured them, we made them happy. Maybe we care about the cast that we've spent time, building relationships with. But at the end of the day, the viewer, the viewer doesn't care about any of that. The viewers just, entertain me, tell me a story, inform me, educate me. And so he would like to show it to somebody who had no relationship with the show whatsoever and get their response. And it infuriates directors. Of course it does. Of course it does. What do you mean? I've spent 20 years perfecting my craft and your dog walker doesn't like the opening. What do you mean? But in retrospect, of course it makes total sense. It's just audience research.
Yeah.
And he would then come in and he would take a scalpel and he would take the first third off of any episode, any show. And he would reorder and start again. Brilliant at writing VO, brilliant at a lot of the work he did was a kind of the hero's journey, a lot of that sort of storytelling, particularly where it came to the sort of shows we made with Jamie. And yeah, I mean, yeah, pretty tough in the edit for people.
So you get to the end of the edit, it goes into Channel 4. Channel 4 are very happy with it, I'm sure, and it goes out a few months after you finish the edit in 2005. And what do you remember thinking? This is going to be big? Do you remember thinking this is really going to do something? What was the expectation around it?
Yeah, I think we had a pretty high expectation.
Right.
I think we thought it was great. I think we were. I mean, I remember going into number 10 and filming in number 10, that meeting with Tony Blair, and thinking, this is a thing. This is. We are actually really doing this. This is
with
really
the Prime
happening.
Minister. This is amazing.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
But it's a funny combination of both surprise but not surprise at all, if that makes sense. So, and I remember thinking, and viewing figures were very different to how they behaved very differently at the time. And so we had some expectations again, because we'd come off of the back of Jamie's Kitchen, which had performed well. Interest in what Jamie did next was pretty high. We knew so much of what we had here was good. We knew that the programs were pretty good. So we were feeling pretty confident about it. I was off having my second child at this time, so I wasn't involved I wasn't back in the office every day at that point. But I certainly remember thinking, oh, this is going to catch light.
Yeah, and it's one of those incredible. Well, Jamie at that time, not just School Dinners, but also Jamie's Kitchen and the Naked Chef, they really encapsulated the start of the millennium as well. I think and Tony Blair and all the kind of music that was out then. It was such a part and parcel of the same thing. And I don't know, I don't know how you'd quantify that or what you would describe as the defining characteristic. But it certainly feels like it was a moment in time, that period, maybe for sort of 7 or 8 years for Jamie. What he did was just like, it was absolutely on the nose culturally. And obviously what he does now is great, but it's different in terms of its placing in the broader context.
Yeah, I think that's right. I think it's a lot harder to campaign now. We talk a lot about, is this too worthy, or is this entertainment?
Yeah.
And so we're nervous about campaigning, or we need to know these outcomes. We're nervous about hectoring our audience, I suppose. And we want people to feel uplifted. So we look for those more uplifting storylines. But great campaigning is uplifting. We just need to go with it. Also, our attention is so much more fragmented now, and there's so many other places and ways that our attention can go. So sorry, that wasn't your question. Your question was, how would I sort of characterize what that was? So I would say definitely The Naked Chef and Jamie's Kitchen, I would say absolutely was on the nose with that, because it was about youth culture. It was about London was having this very vibrant cultural scene, and there was an aesthetic that came with it. And Jamie was doing this great sort of job for cooking, for kitchens, because also there was, more and more women were going to work. So you had this sense that the kitchen was no longer, or the home, the domestic kitchen was no longer the sort of defined by the female of the relationship. And so Jamie was sort of out there going, no, it's cool to be in the kitchen. It's not just for girls. It helps get you girls. Do you know what I mean? If that's what you're into. So he was doing a great job. And you're right, there was a whole aesthetic and a whole movement that was going on. I actually think School Dinners was a little bit outside of that, because in School Dinners, and this is why what Jamie did was so brilliant, he moved from it being about youth culture to him sort of taking on a more of a parental role, really, culturally so. And we've seen that play out. People still cannot forgive him for taking turkey Twizzlers off the menu. That's still, we got so many messages about that, and still do. So it was a turning point for him that doesn't totally align with what was going on culturally around London and the UK at the time. But I definitely hear you. I think his existence, his origin story is definitely built around that. It was Zoe Ball and the Breakfast Show as well. It was all the same part of it. It was Chris Evans. It was Oasis, it was Cool Britannia, and he grew out of that moment.
Yeah, no, I think that's a very good summing up of it. And just you briefly touched then on what campaigning looks like, or what it could look like now. And I was just thinking that actually, seemingly to me, campaigning television now, it doesn't seem to happen in the factual space at all. I mean, it just doesn't happen. But where it is happening still is in drama. Because, of course, last year we had Adolescence, which you could argue is a campaigning piece of drama. We had Mr. Bates versus the Post Office a couple of years ago, which we've also done a podcast on. And in that forum of entertainment, that specific one, there is still campaigning television. It is still doing a job, but it's just not happening in a factual arena anymore.
Yeah, I think you're right. I think you're right. I'm not sure why.
It's a shame, isn't it?
I don't know whether it's because, I talk to lots of people who people really care about things. I think it's just harder than ever to get those stories. I mean, look, it's hard to get shows commissioned. Full stop. It's harder than it has been, certainly during my career. There are more platforms. Attention is more fragmented. Culture is more fragmented. You know, what you watch, what you buy, what you do is a reflection of who I am. And people are looking for those kind of small niche interests and points of interest. And so I think it's harder than ever to gather the UK audience around the TV screen for a moment. So all of that is true. So TV storytelling has to work harder than ever to pull that attention. And I think campaigning is potentially, something that we've lost as a consequence. Also, it's not easy. Coming back to the very first point you made, it's 25 years later. Jamie didn't just make that TV show. I made that TV show and then went on to whatever was next. Jamie didn't. Jamie was committed, as are lots of others. I need to be clear, it's not just him. There's a whole bunch of people, Henry Dimbleby, the Food Foundation, all of these great organizations who are working really hard and have been really committed during that time to make this happen. It's hard. It's really hard. And not many individuals, not many broadcasters have got the chops for that. Also, it's political, and there's that sort of political broadcaster intersection at the moment that maybe makes it harder to make a real stand. And culturally, I think it's more difficult than ever.
Yeah, I agree with you. And finally, just to sum up, because what's quite interesting is from what you've been saying, when you made School Dinners, you had a very clear sense, because it kind of happened within the lifetime of the programme being made, that it was going to create change and that it was going to have a huge impact and so forth, which is different to, say, Mr. Bates versus the Post Office, where they had no idea.
Yeah.
And it was kind of like, went out and it was like, oh my God, this tsunami hits them and lots of things happen. This last couple of weeks, as we mentioned earlier, the government have finally finished effectively the legislation that was started back in 2005 to entirely sort out the dinner menu for the lunch menu for children going to school. So it's kind of, the job is done now, isn't it? I mean, how did you feel reading that and seeing that it was finally sorted?
Well, I don't think the job is completely done. I think that there's lots more work to be done to make sure that part of the job is done. You're absolutely right. School food standards now exist in a way that they never exist, and they are enforceable in a way that they never were before. So to some degree, that is true. But there is so much to be done culturally around food education, around how we change the landscape for young people to ensure that the food that they eat is also healthy as the food that is on offer, if you see what I mean.
Yeah.
So there's still lots of work to be done. How did it make me feel? I suppose it made me feel, I was really surprised. I mean, I didn't know that. I thought we had fixed it. So my first sense was kind of surprise and how has it taken so long? And what does that mean about the political system that we live in, that it's taken so long? And I was also, of course, I was really proud, but I was more impressed by the people who have stuck with it, I think. And those are the people, I think, who really deserve the plaudits for the work that's been done. I think we sparked something, and that something was really important, and I think we did it well. And I feel really proud about that. It's amazing how many people that I work with or spend time with who don't know any of that story. This is all new news. And so it feels great to retell some of that. But I have to, doff my cap to those that have stuck with it in between.
Amazing. Last question then.
Yes.
This
is the tough question.
This is the toughest question. Well, it's provided by the producer, Roz, who's just jumped in to say, you can't finish asking this. Are you an amazing cook now?
So.
After the Kedgley incident.
What I am is an amazing eater.
Right, okay. Yeah. I'm good. I'm one of those as well.
Yeah,
actually.
So I really appreciate great food. But great food can come in the simplest of forms and also incredibly complex. And I love them. And Jamie has introduced me to a number of different things that I might not have enjoyed so much. what was always brilliant about my relationship with Jamie, I believe, is that I'm always a decent cook. I've always loved food. I've always loved eating, but I was never a great cook. And I would say that still probably holds true. But what it means is I was able to pick up in our relationship where Patricia Llewellyn, you remember on The Naked Chef, when she would be asking the questions of the audience to Jamie, why are you doing that? Well, what can you explain what you're doing? And I think that's the role that I like to think that's the role I continue to provide for Jamie. So to help him think about, well, who am I writing this for? If what I want to do is help more families, more people eat delicious, fresh food from scratch at home, how do I reach them? How do I excite them? What information do they need? And I like to think that's the role I provided. I'm sure my cooking has improved, but probably not that much. One of the biggest lessons I learnt working with Jamie is that a lot is determined by the quality of the ingredients that you use. And so I certainly learned I need to upgrade to whatever I can afford. And that is going to help me create the most delicious version of this. And there's loads of things. I mean, caramelizing, and there's loads of wonderful things that I've learned, I'm sure. But I've never been I'm not a fancy cook.
You must be one of the few people who, if Jamie always says, do you want to come around to my place for dinner? You'd be kind of like, well, yeah, I guess I could do.
No,
we could get a takeaway. Or...
I would never say that. Do you know what, Jamie? One of the sorrowful elements of Jamie's life is he doesn't get invited round for dinner very often.
To other people's houses?
To other people's houses,
So do you cook for... can I come round for dinner? Is that what you're saying to you? Jamie wants to come round for dinner again. I've got to find a recipe, I've got to cook, get one of his books out.
That's exactly right. So I have cooked for him a few times, notwithstanding the kedgeree recipe, which was an unmitigated disaster. And, he's actually really easily pleased where food is concerned.
But then you have to choose a recipe from someone else's book. You think, okay, I really can't cook this from Gordon Ramsay's. He'll know, it will be terrible.
I don't know what other people do, but I'm sure there's a little bit of that. Yeah, that's what you should do. You should invite him around for dinner. He'd mostly be interested, I think, in the recipe. Why that recipe? What is it about it? What have you? Yeah. And I think he would, I don't think he'll mind me saying this, but he's quite a nerd when it comes to food. So I think he'd really enjoy getting nerdy. He's got an incredible library of cookbooks, every cookbook you can imagine. He loves other people's cookbooks. He's inspired by them all the time. So no, you shouldn't. I wouldn't be I wouldn't be afraid of what recipe you cook and what.
Well, in the unlikely event that happens, I'll let you know.
All right.
Zoe, thank you so much for coming on and telling us all about your life as a producer as much as everything else, but also about Jamie School Dinners, which was a fantastic project. And it's great to see the legislation not entirely signing things off, but getting close this week. Thank you very much.
Total pleasure. Thank you.
It seems extraordinary to me that Jamie School Dinners came out 21 years ago. It made such an impact at the time and still, as we heard, is making an impact today. I think the thing that I found most interesting about our discussion, though, was just reflecting on how factual television doesn't really campaign anymore. I can't think of a series in recent years that has had the same sort of impact as that did back then. However, there have been a couple of dramas. Adolescence really got us talking about young boys and the problems that they have in society today. And Mr. Bates versus the Post Office prompted huge debate around a national outrage and got the government to really do something about it. But it seems now that the place of campaigning is with drama, and the fact that they can use entertainment values to really draw people into subject matters and fundamentally make them care is, I think, what makes all the difference.